First of all, as a starter, maybe it's good to mention that I have been working in around BIM now for 20 years. My first contact was in 1993 in one big EU project called Combine 2. And then in 1997-2002, I was leading the national BIM program in Finland. And in Finland, BIM became mandatory in the public projects already in 2007. So there is quite a lot of experience on that. But kind of coming to the situation here in UK and globally, it's kind of as a starter, I want to take an example from other industries that what can happen. It's quite interesting when you think about that Kodak was the company inventing the digital camera. And the management didn't want to develop it further because they saw that it's going to kill the film if it succeeds. So they ignored the idea and kind of other companies then started to develop that. And as you probably know, the kind of the end result was that kind of a little more than a year ago, Kodak made bankrupt. Kind of they were not able to adopt the change. And as you can see, the film was very rapidly going out of the market, and then digital techniques were coming rapidly up. The same situation is going to happen in the construction industry globally. It's really something that kind of, and those who still believe that you can kind of stay in business in 2D, they are wrong. The time frame might be a little bit longer than in the digital camera, but kind of the same phenomenon will happen. Because when the supply chain kind of starts moving in that direction, if you are not on board, you cannot deal with the other people. That's a fact. And of course, here in UK, this picture has been there already earlier. This has been really kind of I would say, the wake-up call. This has really kind of made clear to the industry that this is something important. And I started at that Salford University 3 years ago in May 2010. At that time, still, for example, in our university and also in many other places in the UK, people were saying that modeling is not going to happen anytime soon. We can't start teaching that because it's too complicated, too expensive. Industry wants people who can make drawings, so we can't do it. But then in October 2010, when Paul Morel said that government will start demanding that changed the game. And really, just to kind of describe about the demand is that we started last year BIM and integrated master's program in BIM and integrated design. In the first year, 2011, we had 22 students, which is not bad for a new master's program. Now we have 92 in the second year. That's just describing how fast this area is going. And what's happening here in UK is quite unique. I have been involved in the BIM implementation in all Nordic countries, USA, and I have never seen so rapid change that I have seen here in UK in the last 2 years. I would say that 2 years ago, UK related to the BIM was somewhere there around the kind of same level with Spain and France. And now, as you can see, it's in Europe on the second place after Finland. The size of those circles is basically the number of the Autodesk licenses in those countries. So it's describing the market, how big the market is. And it's really quite clear that if the development is going the same way as it's going at the moment, UK will be number one in the world very, very soon. So it's kind of, and to me, that's quite clear. And how I see the situation is really that kind of, and this is the typical way that when something new comes to the market, you have this kind of the early adopters or forerunners who are interested about the technologies. And then comes the kind of this chasm, the situation where the technology can either live or die. BIM has now really passed that. It's clearly on the bowling alley, which means that the market is reshaping and it's starting, the tornado phase is starting, which means that the market adoption will be very, very fast. That is something that I can see very clearly. But there are also a lot of misunderstandings about BIM. Many people think that BIM is a software package that you can buy and see that as kind of a silver bullet or panacea that will be solving all the problems in our industry. Personally, I think that the best comparison that I've heard is that BIM software is like buying a membership card to a fitness club. Buying the card doesn't really make you fit. You really have to start working. You have to change the way that you are processing things. And BIM is exactly that. So it's very much really fundamental process change in our industry. It's very good for the communication. It's also enabling the improved integration and collaboration and management of information, but it doesn't do it automatically. It is something that we have to do in the industry. We really have to change the way that we are collaborating. And one big opportunity is also that it's making possible to build the virtual prototypes of the buildings. Buildings are unique, and we want to live, of course, in an environment where buildings are unique. We can't kind of have an environment where we would be producing buildings the same way as we are producing cars. Nobody would want to live in that kind of an environment. And so the only possibility for us is really this virtual prototyping. And now we have the technology to do it. But, as said, it's an enabler, not automatically making these changes. And one of the things that personally I think that it's extremely important is kind of start thinking about what's there for me, what's there for my company. Because if you just kind of start doing it because government wants that, it's not a good business, really. You really have to think that what is your business model? What is kind of something that where can you have the competitive advantage of the technology? Because then it's really bringing some benefits to your company. To me, that is something that kind of, and of course, best companies are already doing that. So it's really something that one size doesn't fit all. It's really something that kind of we have to think about kind of what is the right way to do it. Often you hear that where people say that small companies cannot kind of come to the BIM world. They can't afford it. It's actually not true, because small companies can be very agile. I know very many very small companies, even kind of something like 2-3 people, who are in the top of the world in the BIM knowledge. So it's something that the strategy to implement BIM is different in a small and big company. So you can't just kind of copy the models that the others are using, but you have to think about what you really want to do. So the key question is that what I'm trying to do with BIM. BIM is not a goal. In that sense, it's really something that kind of, even if I think about the government strategy, to me it's really not so that kind of, it would be a good, as stated that UK wants to be number one in BIM. Okay, that's fine, but why? What is the reason? And of course, when I look at the governmental program, there are very clearly that kind of the goals that really kind of improve the efficiencies, cut the costs, improve the sustainability. So there are clear goals for the government program, but this is something that is kind of there are many ways to utilize BIM. And of course, the business model for, let's say, architect office and construction company or building owner, they are different. So again, it's kind of thinking about what is really the goal, and then think about the tool. In January, I was in Washington, D.C., speaking about the BIM education, and Penn State University, they have been developing the BIM guidelines, or the kind of BIM strategy development guidelines, very much in United States. They say that quite often the situation is so that the companies are buying BIM software, and then they start thinking about what can we do with the software. And of course, it should be the other way around. First think that what you want to do, and then kind of decide what is the right tool. That's, of course, the way that we usually are buying tools. And you can really look at the situation from internal viewpoint, kind of looking at kind of what are my services? Will I provide the similar services in BIM environment, or is there something else that I could really can I expand my business models? Is it am I looking just for the improved quality, to make really the drawings as we did before? That's also one possibility, of course. Then really how to learn it efficiently. Learning fast so that you really can use the tools rapidly in a productive way. Then have to consider about the software, hardware. Is it one software or several software? Depends, of course, again, on the company type and size. And then really think about also on the return on investment. Because this is a tool, it really has to pay back. You can't just think that, okay, I will invest in BIM without understanding that how long time it will take before I will really get return on my investment. There are very good returns on investments if you do it in the right way. I have some examples in the end of the presentation. But then also it's kind of the external viewpoint. What is the value for the customer? Can we provide just what they expect to really fulfill, for example, the governmental requirement, or can I provide more than expected? And if you think about the other industries, usually the model is that kind of, and they are not just producing what the client expects, they really want to exceed the client expectations. We wouldn't have products like iPad or iPhone if that would be that kind of, that the company would have been producing only what the customer were asking, because customers could not imagine that before they really saw the product. Why not think about that also, that can we really improve our products so that we exceed the customer expectations? Then, of course, the very important part, and absolutely one of the low-hanging fruits in the BIM implementation, is the communication and decision support. It's really something that we can look at different alternatives, that this term optioneering is something that has been emerging together with BIM, so that you really can produce several different options to do something. And that is something that kind of also often is forgotten. People think that BIM is just kind of a documentation of the design solution, but it should be really a tool to look the best possible solution, not only in the design, but also in the construction phase, how to produce the building in the most efficient way. Then the collaboration, it's kind of one of the things that we are not very good in our industry understanding the information flows. We are still very much locked in the kind of a document-based thinking. People are thinking that I have to send these drawings in this scale at this stage, but really the information content, what is needed and should be delivered, it's not very well understood. I think that this is an area where we have to learn quite a lot in the future. And then coordination. I was actually quite glad to see that there was already this clash avoidance, because that's really what we should be doing. It's funny that people are so proud that kind of about the clash detection in the BIM environment. Why are we kind of praising that we are finding the mistakes that we have been doing? We should avoid those mistakes in the first place, of course. And then, of course, the interoperability kind of open standards are very important in our industry, because our industry is very fragmented, and especially small companies cannot kind of have all possible tools. So it should be the situation that we can use whatever tool is best in our processes and then share the information with our partners. And that is something that when I look at, for example, Nordic countries and USA, kind of, these open standards are always as the basis of the client requirements, especially on the public side. And of course also that open standards are part of the UK government's requirements as well. But it's something that kind of, and also companies should be considering in their own tools when they buy them. As said, there are kind of in the title that there are also challenges. One of the challenges definitely is in our industry. We are very good in starting new projects. We have very long time kind of defined the roles that when we start the new project, everybody knows exactly what they should be doing in that project, what is their role. When I have been speaking with the software industry, they really admire construction industry in that sense. Because in software industry, if you are taking several companies to a new project, it takes a long time before people understand what is their role in there. But in this changing situation, this is also, in a way, kind of a hindrance. It's really kind of locking us into the kind of thinking that what has been our traditional role, we are not easily kind of seeing that, okay, my role is actually changing now when the things are changing in the environment where we are working. Then also, really the business models are one of the things. If you think about kind of the way that usually construction projects are starting, client is really asking for low bids for every fragment of the process. And if you think about that kind of applying the same policy, for example, building a football team, do you think that you would have very good success if you would be selecting the cheapest player in every place on the field? Why do we expect that we will have good results in our industry if that's the policy? And this is really something that kind of, and I think that kind of, it really requires that procurement process is changing. We are not just looking at the cheapest price of every piece of the process, but really looking at the kind of the whole. What is the most affordable way to do what we want to do? Of course, the price is important, but kind of sub-optimizing it by asking the lowest bid for every bid. It's kind of just meaning that people are not trying to optimize the whole process. They try to minimize their own workload, because that's the only way to survive. Then also, one of the things is that kind of often people, especially the designers, asking, why should I start producing more and better information? Because the construction company is the one, or the client is the one benefiting from that. I'm not getting any extra. I'm only getting more responsibilities by delivering this. So what is really the kind of the incentive for the designers to do something differently? And then, of course, the legal responsibilities. Doing things in different way, it's exposing you to new risks. And of course, everybody wants to kind of avoid that kind of a situation. And if you look at, for example, the McGraw-Hill Smart Market report, you can see very clearly there that kind of, and if you look at the negative impact of implementation of BIM, architects and engineers see clearly kind of a much more negative impact in there than the construction companies and owners. So it's kind of, which is quite obvious. In a way, if you think that you produce better information for the process, of course, then kind of the benefits are coming downstream in that information flow. And that means that we have to really start thinking about the business models. And one way to kind of think that this is what has happened in the United States, this integrated project delivery model was changing very much the game in US. Before that, the designers were saying that I'm not sharing my models with the construction company because they will find some small mistake and then they will sue us, regardless how personal level, that kind of, and unless people see the benefits for themselves, they are very kind of, they try to avoid the changes. Then also one of the challenges is kind of, and if you really think about this change here in UK, it's a massive task. This is from the figures are coming from the government's working groups, training and education work groups. 150,000 companies, 3 million people. Who is going to educate the educators for this group? It's really massive task if you really think. I don't think that kind of we can expect that everybody in our UK construction industry will be on board in 2016. Definitely a lot of people will be, and a lot of companies will be. But there will be also people who are behind that. I'm quite sure about that. Especially when you look at this other slide is also coming from the training and education work group. There are lots of areas where we don't have much knowledge. Even in the kind of in the institutions, in the universities, there are not so many experts on the integrated use of BIM around. So it's quite a challenging task to kind of how to fill the gap, how to really educate the people so that they really understand the concepts correctly and can use it. So this is, of course, in a way you can think that this is also for the educational institutions. This is, of course, also an opportunity on the other hand. But on the industry level, this is definitely a challenge. Then to some examples that kind of what I see. On purpose, I picked kind of some relatively different things. One is many people think that BIM is only for the new construction, but it's not. It's also a very good tool for renovation. We did research on the Manchester Town Hall complex, which is kind of they are renovating the old main library and making part of the town hall also part of the library. And it was an interesting project in that sense that, first of all, the client didn't mandate BIM. It started so that kind of first one of the architects, there are two architects doing different parts of the building. One of the architects was using BIM from the internal viewpoint. And then also the construction company who was hired for the job also wants to implement BIM in their processes. So that was kind of the starting point. And when John Lorimer asked us to make research there, the original scope was that let's try to compare the one where the architect is using the traditional methods and the other part where the architect is using BIM. But before we could start the research, actually the other architects started to use BIM as well. So kind of we couldn't kind of go with the original scope. So it kind of changed so that we were kind of looking at, okay, what happens in this kind of a project where there is no BIM protocol, no kind of defined requirements for the BIM, how the team is in a way building the BIM competencies and the use of BIM there. And of course, the starting point was that all project participants were very eager to learn how to use BIM. They really wanted to do it. So there was kind of a very positive feeling about the BIM in the project, and that was, of course, one of the prerequisites to success. And actually, the findings were quite good in that sense that kind of, and even in that case, you can have quite a lot of benefits from BIM, even though it's kind of not mandated in the beginning and not everybody is using that in the beginning, but it's emerging through the team. So one, it's definitely kind of the visualization, the communication about the different needs for the spaces. All buildings are complicated because they are not kind of spatially designed for the new technology that we are installing there. So it's quite challenging to find this kind of where to put all the new ducts and other technologies that you have to install. And in that, BIM was helping, especially in this old main library, which is very complicated from its geometry. It's very difficult to kind of try to make enough elevations and plans from that so that the people could really understand that. Also, one of the things was really kind of in the use of BIM to compare the different options. For example, in this courtyard lighting, there were several options, and the client was kind of unable to understand the models much better than any other type of explanations about what they are going to get. Then, of course, the design coordination to identify the errors, sometimes the errors with the existing building and the design, or then between the different design disciplines. Also, the construction company was able to use the models for the automated quantity takeoff, and that was, of course, forming the basis for the cost estimation processes. And then you have quite a lot of information of the objects. Actually, we are now starting another part of this research looking at the possibilities how to use the information that the design and construction teams have been producing in the facility management and maintenance things. But there is a lot of data that kind of, it's potentially useful. And of course, this is again something which is very much in the focus of the governmental development, look at kind of the asset information, how to use that. But to be honest, that is an area where there is very little experience around the world. There are very few places where people have been using BIM in the facility management and operations. And then, of course, also the kind of this traditional 4D, really looking at the construction sequences, how to install things. So it basically, most of the benefits that people usually are recognizing in the early use of BIM, they are possible even if you haven't really kind of agreed about those beforehand, and also in renovation projects, not just in new buildings. Then kind of another example, this is from Finland, a leading building services engineering office in Finland. I was the vice president of innovation and development of the company a couple of years before I started at Salford. The company started the BIM implementation already in the early 90s. So they have been doing that for 20 years now. So the CEO of the company had a really clear vision. And actually Martin Fischer from Stanford University has said that CEO is one of the two persons that at that time understood really the business potential of BIM in the whole world. The other one is the founder of the Gary Technologies. What the company has been doing is that kind of first they started to build a platform which is integrating the different parts of the building services design. So getting the kind of the client requirements, then the model from the architect, or if they don't get the architect model, then they build it themselves. Then kind of making sure that the geometry is correct, then doing the zoning, then doing the simulation, and only after that they start the system design. And all the simulation results are feeding to the design so that, for example, the size of the ducts are automatically calculated from the airflows that you have in the database. And what the company has been doing, they have been picking best tools around the world and building the integration platform inside the company. And then when they started to have this platform, they realized that actually we can expand our business from being just the building services designers into lifecycle information managers. They are collecting data from the building systems and also the maintenance operations and reporting that to the client. So they really are now kind of working with the client also when the building projects are ending. For example, all the Nokia factories around the world are part of this reporting system. So, and they have quite a lot of really big clients around the world using that system. Just to illustrate about the kind of possibilities of the kind of, this is the set of tools that this one company is using in the building services design in an integrated way. Just kind of I think that this is very good illustration about how complex kind of this environment is. There are huge amount of possibilities, and you really don't have to kind of stay in the old way of doing things. You can really kind of look at new possibilities and expand your kind of business areas. And this company has been very successful. Now they have about 500 people working in the company, and even during this regression in Europe, company has been steadily growing because they have a different product than anybody else in the business. And just kind of one of the ideas about this kind of the facility management system is that kind of you collect the data on the grassroots level, kind of from individual buildings, individual operations that you do there, and from the building automation systems. And then you have kind of different levels of reporting. And reporting for kind of course, on the building level, but then on portfolio level or on the company level. And one of the reasons why they have been so successful in selling these services to the big companies is that when you have the ability to report to the kind of to the CEO of the company about how their buildings are behaving, that is making the selling very easy, because it's really kind of serving the purpose, kind of the business of the person making the decisions. If you try to sell it on this level, it's very difficult because they don't have the power to make decisions. And I think that the same way we can kind of look at BIM, no matter what is the business area, what is really the kind of the business, strategic business reason to implement BIM? What are the benefits there? Not just kind of think about something like clash detection, which is really not that interesting for the people making the decisions. Then the third example is from Skanska, both in UK and in Finland. One of the things, Skanska started to use BIM in Finland in residential production very early, kind of around 2005. And one of the things was that they made a very clear implementation strategy, so that kind of in the level 1 there, the green area is something that is mandatory to use in all projects. Then the level 2 and level 3 are something that the business units and project can decide if it's relevant, if they have the capacity to do the things. But it kind of there was kind of a clear indication about what are the benefits of BIM in kind of and what are the easy things to do? What are the low-hanging fruits? What should you really start doing? And this has been very successful in the company. They have been really getting very good results on that. I will go back to Finland after this slide, but this is from UK. In UK, Skanska is using BIM more kind of, I would say that normal way nowadays. It's kind of a big project like hospitals and other very complex buildings. That's very, very typical also in USA. But as you can see, here are some figures that, for example, in this one hospital, kind of avoiding the average scope increase, £1.7 million. Then the return on investment, 5 to 1, very good payback for the money. And also interesting that kind of just using table pieces instead of paper documents was reducing the time of the site management by 50%. Because you don't have to run to look at when you there is a problem on site, you don't have to go and try to find the drawings. You have them with you on your tablet. And this is really something that kind of a very, very kind of an easy way to do if you start having the databases that are compatible with that kind of tools. And then also the quantity take of 350,000 pounds. So financial results are clearly kind of outweighing all the costs that might be in the implementation. Also, now back to Finland, and kind of their strategy was really kind of to go to this zero error process, so that there are no errors in different stages of the process. And I was really amazed when I heard that they really have had several projects where they have been able to do it, so that there has been no error whatsoever when you deliver the building to the customers. And that's basically unheard in the construction industry. That's really something that kind of so BRE can be a very, very good quality management tool when implemented in the correct way. One of the things also that Skanska is doing is using the BIM in very early stages for the simulations, looking at the kind of that you really meet the environmental requirements that you have set to the project. We all know that kind of the possibilities to influence the design are much better when you do it early on. And this is something that kind of, and it's also one of the messages I want to give, that you can start using models in very early stages of the process. And you don't have to kind of be in the kind of bidding phase or the kind of construction phase before you can use the models for the simulation. Just having the spatial model of the building, very simple model of the building, you can do the energy simulations. Senat Properties has been doing that now since 2007 in all projects. So it's possible to kind of really start kind of looking at different alternatives, look at the best alternative in the beginning, and then verifying the results in the end of the process by using simulation tools. Another thing that Skanska is doing, that they do a very detailed model on the site planning. The site people are really building these models. They put the temporary structures, as you can see there, and also the storage places, for example, where you put the kind of gypsum sheets or whatever. The reason for this is that kind of quite often on site what happens is that you are piling things in the place where you should next do something when nobody is thinking about those. And there is a lot of time people are kind of using when moving things from one place. There's a huge amount of waste in time and material on construction sites. And this is something that many people have been saying kind of that you can't do it. It's too expensive to do this. But they have definitely got a very good payback for that. So really thinking about how to start building. And these are kind of the results that kind of they have been publishing. They have been increasing their profit margin by 45%. It's a huge improvement when you start thinking, from 9% to 13%. Waste reduction, 45%. Accidents reduced 5%, client satisfaction increased by 5%. So it's clearly improving the results. So using BIM is definitely paying back. And just kind of as a last example, but I think that it's now happening. Actually, we saw already in the video that kind of not just modeling the end result, the building as it will be, but also the modeling the production process. Really looking at how you do the things. For a long time, I was thinking that kind of Skanska's way to do this kind of site modeling was kind of the best example of that. But when looking at DPR construction in California, this is the level of modeling that they are doing nowadays. They are modeling really kind of on component level where they are putting things. And then when you look at the photograph from the site, it's not just having a pretty picture. They really do it that way. It's really quite amazing when you think, and this is, personally I think that DPR Construction is probably the most innovative construction company in the whole world. They are located almost next to Stanford University, and they are definitely utilizing that position in the collaboration with the university. It's really amazing company, really kind of looking at the possibilities to push the boundaries further and further. And they are very much doing those integrated project delivery projects with Southern Health in California. But just kind of that the possibilities, kind of technologically, we can do nowadays almost whatever we want. The question is really that how is that really serving our business goals, and of course also then kind of my final picture from Denmark. I think that this is very good kind of summary of the things that kind of from the client viewpoints, that of course the model is not the purpose. Kind of the client wants to have better buildings and with kind of better value for their money. That's really the purpose. And when you think about kind of how to implement BIM, this goal should be always kind of there in your mind. So thank you.
Thank you.